Hey, what's going on? Welcome back to the vlog. You are about to watch a session that I just played. So I hope you guys enjoy this one. If you do, like and subscribe. Let's get to it.
I've been playing for about 45 minutes now, and my table's nothing special. I got looked up early when I made a bet on the river and had 9 high, and then I went on this incredible run of great cards, but just couldn't get anybody to look me up again. Just kind of scooped a bunch of really small pots. We're in +1 for this hand, and we look down at pocket aces. We see a limp from under the gun before the action gets to me, and I bump it up to $14. Under the gun is the only taker, so we're off to a flop heads up. The flop is King 9-4 with 2 hearts. My opponent checks to me, and I have the ace of hearts, which I think is a good card, so I don't think I have to be too aggressive with my betting, and I fire for $20. My opponent calls, so we'll see the turn. The turn is an ace of diamonds, so it improves me to top set. Once again, my opponent checks, and I think a check here or a bet here is fine. I want to go ahead and bet to make sure I don't give hearts a free card, so this time I bet $45, trying to charge all draws or any kings. He lets out a sigh, and then he folds. We're in the low jack this time, and we look down at ace queen of diamonds. We see a limp from under the gun before it folds to me, and I bump it up to $12. The small blind is the only caller, so we're off to a flop in position, heads up. The flop is 6-9-5 with 2 hearts, so I've kind of whiffed here. The action checks through though, so we'll see a turn for free. The turn is a king of clubs, and once again my opponent checks it to me, so I decide to go ahead and take a stab for $25. And he calls pretty quickly, so we'll see the river. The river's a king of spades. I actually think it's a really good card because I don't think he has a king now. However, on this card, he leads for $25. He's laying me a really good price, but this guy's been pretty tight since he sat down, so it's hard to think that he's getting out of line here. Plus, all I really beat is some sort of missed heart draw, so I let it go. Shortly after, a vlog watcher named Diego sits down. Diego's a good guy, he's a lot of fun, and he gives a lot of action, so this should open this table up a little bit. We're in the small blind, and we look down at King 10 offsuit. We see limps from under the gun, the hijack, and the button before the action gets to me, and I bump it up to $14. Under the gun and the button both make the call, so we're off to a flop 3 ways. The flop is ace king 7, so I flop myself middle pair here. It checks to the button who bets $20. I elect to go ahead and call instead of raising, as this guy's been pretty aggressive since sitting down, and I know under the gun doesn't have an ace because he limp called his way into this pot. I don't think the button has one either. Under the gun does in fact make the call, so we're still 3 ways to a turn. The turn is a 5, it shouldn't really change much, and the action will check through on this card, so we'll see a river for free. The river is a 5, and it pairs the board, so now I've got 2 pair with an ace kicker. I think I might actually have the best hand here, so I bet $40. I do this kind of as a blocker bet, because what I don't want to do is check to under the gun and have him overbet the pot and make me second guess my read. Plus, if anybody has an ace, they'll let me know on this bet. Under the gun calls and the button folds, we flip it over and we both have King 10 offsuit. What's interesting is afterwards he said he should have blasted off on the river and that I definitely would have folded, but I'm never folding to this particular player in this particular spot. There's a button straddle this time. We're under the gun with King Jack of spades. We see a call from the big blind, and when the action's on me, I bump it up to $25. I'm doing this because I'm pretty sure seat 1, the guy from the last hand, will call, which he does, as do the button and the big blind, so we're off to a flop 4 ways. The flop is Jack 9 deuce with 2 diamonds, so we flop top pair here. It checks to me, and I put out a bet of $50. I'm looking to charge seat 1 a premium price to continue, as well as anyone else who might have 2 diamonds or a worse jack. Seat 1 looks like he's going to call, but he eventually folds, as does everybody else. We win a small one here. We're in the small blind this time, and we look down at pocket 7s. We see a limp from under the gun, seat 1. It folds to the button who also limps. I call and the big blind check, so we're off to a flop 4 ways. The flop is 5-5 deuced with 2 diamonds, so not a terrible flop for me. I check, and the button takes the betting lead and bets $5. Everybody calls, and so when it gets to me, I raise to $20. Under the gun, the guy I'm going for is the only caller, so we're off to a turn heads up. The turn is a 9 of hearts, so it's an overcard to my pair, but I'm not sure how many 9s Under the Gun is going to show up with here, so I lead for $45. Under the Gun in seat 1 calls pretty quickly, and I think he might be on a diamond draw, so we'll see a river. The river is a 10 of hearts, and I don't love this card, but the flush draw did brick out here. So now I've got to figure out a size that can hero call me, and I go ahead and choose $75, about half pot. My opponent doesn't think very long and he calls, so I flip it over, not necessarily loving the situation. He doesn't immediately show, and when he does, you'll be a little surprised at what he has. He has Jack Deuce of Hearts for bottom pair. Okay. During the next hand, seat 1 makes mention that he's not happy that I'm taking video and making a vlog. I assure him his face isn't going to be in it, but he's still not pleased. I think he's more embarrassed that he made such a bad call and now it's going on YouTube, and I think I've tilted him a little bit. So he has about $300 left. Let's see if I can get it. There's a button straddle. We're in the big blind, and we look down at ace-9 of hearts. We see a call from the small blind, and with the action on me, I bump it up to $20. I'm not really sure why. Because I have a suited ace, I guess? Implied odds, maybe? Seat 1 makes the call, as does the cutoff and the button and the small blind, so we're off to a flop multi-way. The flop is ace deuce 8 rainbow, so I flop top pair, but I've got a weak kicker here. It checks to me, and I elect to check to see where everyone else is at, and it actually checks all the way through. The turn is a 5, so it connects the board a little bit more. The small blind bets his last $50. I'm obviously not going anywhere with top pair, but if I call here, can I rope one of the other players in? That's my plan as I make the call, but everybody else folds, so we're heads up to a river. The river is a queen of hearts, and my opponent's reluctant to show, and he kind of shakes his head no, so I flip over my hand, and we win. About 15 minutes later, the table breaks, and I get moved to a new table with some younger guys who are totally dressed the part. Hoodie up, earbuds, glasses. Let's see what this old man can do against them. Also, update, C1 wasn't really mad I was filming. He just asked to make sure I don't put his face on the vlog. Sir, your identity is safe. About 35 minutes of folding goes by before there's a button straddle. We're in the hijack, and we look down at Queen Jack offsuit. There are 2 callers, and when the action gets to me, I bump it up to $14. I'm not really sure why I chose this super small raise size. The cutoff, the button, and both limpers call, so we're off to a flop multi-way. The flop is King 4-4 with 2 clubs, so not a great flop here, but the action will check through, so we'll go to a turn. The turn is a 10 of hearts, so now it gives me an open-ended straight draw, and it brings a second flush draw on the board. It checks all the way around to the button, who bets $24. I think that's a fair price to continue with my draw, so I make the call, and I'm the only caller, so we're off to a river heads up. The river is a jack of clubs, so it gives me second pair, but it also brings in ace-queen, and the flush gets there. I check it over to my opponent, and he bets $45. This bet really feels like it's for value. However, is this the card I'm supposed to fold on? It's not necessarily the face card I wanted, but now I've got a pair to fall back on against something like a missed draw, though I don't really know what draw missed here. I think it's just way too tight to make a fold. How do I call that turn bet and then make a pair and get rid of it afterwards? All those hands that I mentioned that got there, I think he can credibly rep any one of those hands made without actually having it, especially since I checked to him. So I end up making the call. He says good call, I show, and I win. This hand is ridiculous. We're in the big blind, and we look down at pocket tens. We see a limp from under the gun before it folds all the way around to the small blind, who also limps. With the action on me, I'm going to raise, and I size up here to $20. I went with this size because I think the small blind will call any reasonable raise that I make pre-flop. And he does, as does the other player, so we're off to a flop 3 ways. The flop is 6-7-8 with 2 hearts, so I have flopped myself a gut shot straight draw, and I have an overpair here. The small blind just rips it in my face. This has been his theme all day. He's betting $721 into a $60 pot. Technically, it's $560 effective, but it's not like I was short stacked or anything. So, what is he doing this with? I am in the blender here, as I actually think I'm ahead, but a hand like ace-9 or ace-jack of hearts has so much equity against me.
Sorry guys, I have a decision there.
Do I want to risk my whole day, a $500 plus stack on what could be a coin flip? After a very long tank, I end up making the fold. Thank God Under the Gun calls for way less, so we'll see a run out. The turn is a 3 of clubs, the river a 2 of hearts. They actually both had the same hand. They both had ace-9, but the small blind had ace-9 of hearts for a rivered flush. Being results oriented, it's a great fold, especially because 50% of my straight outs were gone. But this one hurt a little bit. I think I should be calling there some percentage of the time, but in this instance, it's good that I didn't. There's a button straddle, we're in the small blind, and we look down at pocket sevens. I make the call, as does the big blind, and it folds around to the button who bumps it up to $20. This is the gentleman from the previous hand, so the big blind and I both call. We're off to a flop 3 ways. The flop is 10-5 deuce with 2 hearts, so not a terrible flop here. It checks to the button who down bets to $10 this time. Action on me, and I put in a check raise to $35. I'm doing this to put pressure on draws and extract value from smaller pocket pairs while also representing strength. Only the button calls, so we're off to a turn heads up. The turn is another 10, so it pairs the board. Once again, I check, prepared to check call any reasonably sized bet, but my opponent checks behind. The river is an ace of diamonds, and so the heart draw is bricked out, and I decide to leave for $65. My hand only has a little bit of showdown value, so I'm going to represent that I was on the ace high flush draw and bing top pair on the river. My opponent thinks about it a little bit, and then he folds. We are under the gun, and we look down at 6-7 of diamonds. I'm going to open this hand for $10. It's a very loose open here from under the gun, but I'm looking for a little bit of action as it's getting towards the end of the night. The small blind is the only caller, so we're off to a flop heads up. The flop is 8-9-10. Yep, flop the bottom end of it. It checks to me, and I fire for $10 again. If I'm going to try to get 3 streets of value with this hand, I've got to start with a small post-flop bet. My opponent calls, so we're off to the turn. The turn is a deuce of spades, so brings in a spade flush draw. It checks to me, and this time I fire for $40. And once again, my opponent calls, so we're off to the river. The river's an 8 of hearts, so it pairs the board, but all the flush draws missed. I'm not really sure if this is a good card or a bad card. For the 3rd time, my opponent checks it to me, and now I need to figure out a sized bet that he can call. This guy's played pretty smart since he sat down, so he's not going to call a huge bet. He has about $200 in his stack, and so I settle on $75. After about 20 seconds of thinking, my opponent makes the call. I show my hand, and we are good here. In the final hand of the night, we are under the gun, and we look down at pocket twos. I limp before +1 bumps it up to $5. We see 3 callers in front of me, so I call looking to hit a set. We're off to a flop multi-way. Flop is ace deuce 5 with 2 hearts, so yay, I did it. The big blind leads for $15 here. I don't want to chase him off, and so I elect to just call here, as does +1, so we're off to a turn 3 ways. The turn is a 7, and it checks to me, and again, I want to keep people in, so I decide to go ahead and check. Now, looking back, this is stupid. I played this hand conservatively on the flop so I could try to make a move on the turn, and what do? I end up checking. The action on +1, he checks behind, so we'll see a river. The river's an 8 of diamonds, so it's connected this board a little bit more, and the big blind bets out for $20. With the action on me, I bump it up to $55. +1 folds, and it's back on the big blind. I want to give him a price too good not to call, and I know he'll fold if I make my bet too big. My opponent shows me an ace, but then he ends up folding. At this point, this table breaks, and I get moved to a new table, but it's not a great vlogging seat, though there are some stacks here. I have a feeling if I try to vlog from where I'm sitting, it's just going to draw way more attention to me, so I actually pack up the camera, and we're up $500 here. I only played about another 20 minutes or so. I got involved in a hand that I'll talk about here in the big blind with pocket 8s. I fired for $25 on a 6-7-10 board, and a player jammed for $125 total. Then another player called for less, about $95. So It's $100 for me to call to win about 300 or so, and I feel like the price was just too good to fold, so I ended up making the call. My hand didn't improve, and we ended up losing the pocket queen, so we gave a little bit away there at the end, but still, another really solid session.
Okay, wrapping it up on that session. I was pretty sure it was going to be a good session. I mean, look at me. I'm dressed to the nines like a cool dude, so not necessarily the heaviest volume session, but a session of some really good hands. After I turned the camera off, there was one big hand there at the end where I gave a little bit back, but that's going to happen sometimes. I think it was the right call, but you guys tell me in the comments if it was. Into the game tonight for $200, out for $506. If you enjoy, like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.
If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel for more poker content. And you can follow me on Instagram at 7cardflushpoker.